Che Black, straight like that.
Peace and Black Power family, it's your brother Che Black, straight like that. I recently sat down with the esteemed elder, highly esteemed elder, and premier warrior scholar of the 21st century, and Mwalimu, Baruti. We discussed his time at Morehouse as an educator, as well as his time in Chicago as a student, and at what point he became aware of the programming designed to feminize African males, what prompted him to speak out against it, and how he not only dealt with the loss of speaking engagements, but criticized and abandoned by those he respected as peers. He also gave a clear definition of the term promosexual, a term he himself coined and is becoming a common term when talking about the defenders of pedophilia and sexual confusion. He also spoke about his involvement and continued dedication to African-centered education and its importance and value. This was a privilege and an honor to sit down with the esteemed elder. I hope you enjoy and take something from this dialogue. Peace and Black Power. Peace and Black Power family, it's your brother Che Black, straight like that. And I'm here with the esteemed elder and the premier scholar of the 21st century, and Mwalimu, Baruti. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing good, brother. It's always good to be with you.
It's a pleasure and an honor to have you sitting with me right now.
Oh, the fuel goes same both ways, always.
Now, before we start, I just wanted to get into your history, where you're from, where were you educated at?
Raised in D.C., and I'm trying to make this short, but I dropped out of school in the 7th grade, did stupid stuff for about a decade. And some things happened in my life that made me realize that I didn't want folks who weren't as, I'll say, as intelligent, not that that's an arrogant thing, but weren't as intelligent as I was telling me what to do. So I ended up going back to school, took it very seriously. Came out of undergrad, #1 in my class, ended up with some money to go to University of Chicago and pursued studies in sociology there. I was at the University of Chicago, I guess about 9 years. From there went to, while I was there, taught at Chicago State for about 2 years, and from there went on to teach at Morehouse. Often I have to explain to people in terms of knowledge about us. This was something that I did on my own. This was not a function of a course or classes or anything like that. The only course that I've taken on us is African American art, and that was at Alabama State University. So, well, I guess to make that short also, at the University of Chicago, the graduate population of us is less than 4% of the population there. So Enia and I, we found a lot of comfort in just being in each other's presence during our study, go to the library, grab a bunch of books, come home. But one day I was at the library and I was looking for a particular book, and I discovered the Blak section in the Regenstein Library. And it was not stacked, but there was like a row of shelves, maybe 40 feet long, and it was just us. And I spent 3 years in that section and getting books, taking them out. And interestingly, the whole time that I was in that section, no one ever came near it. I was the only person who ever visited that section. So that was where I really began to discover us. And like most warrior scholars, most of the study and the research and all the rest of it that we do to improve ourselves, that we do to become clear on who we are and what we're about. It's not done in a classroom. It's not done in a course. It's done in the wee hours of the morning when we're reading and studying who we are, listening to our scholars on videos, things like that. So on the question of education, we talk about formal education. Well, then that was in their institutions. But when it came to education by us, that was in our home.
Indeed, indeed. Now, you were at Morehouse. Tell us about your time at Morehouse. How was your experience there?
Well, Morehouse with the students was fun. The administration was always a pain, but I was a very popular faculty. So I really spent a lot of time not following the rules because there was the protection of the students. So I had classes where there were over 100 students, and you always go ahead and like 25, 30 students in class. We would have class outside on the grass, and that was also something that you were supposed to do. But you know, it's the students were of the caliber and had the interest where I could make an agreement. I say, we got to go outside. You all want to go outside because there's stuff in here. But if we go outside, fellas, you can't be looking when you hear high heels walk by. Folks can't be looking around. We had to be paying attention. Two guys grabbed the blackboard, we go outside, and we had class outside. So for me, it was fun. It was a learning experience from the students. I said the administration was an administration. Their priority was money. And I learned that quickly the year I was acting chair of the sociology department there, which I was pretty much miserable that year. But it was also very good because, again, EDI was there. So this was provided an example to the students of complementarity in terms of faculty. The downside of Morehouse, and I really didn't begin to see the depth of it until my last couple of years. I saw it more because her office was near where the Glee Club congregated, and she would talk about how she would come out of her office and she would hear these eerie sounding voices. She knew they weren't female, but they were very imitative to an extreme of female. And she walked down to the space where they were at one day, and she just saw a bunch of males with these high-pitched voices walking around acting like little girls. And because she had, and I'm talking more about her because a lot of what I'm aware of relative to that issue came through her classes because she was teaching the basic English classes. Everybody had to come through them. And folks who came to my classes for the most part were more serious sociology, political science, economic folks. So folks who knew about me stayed away from my classes.
Now, what time period is this?
This was in the 90s. Okay. We started in 91, and I was there for 9 years. She was there for 10 years. But ENEI was giving a test one day, and she walks up and down between the desks when she's giving the test, and there was one guy in the class who had a excuse from whoever legally that he could wear sunglasses. But as she passed by him and he's taking the test, she saw mascara and she saw eyeliner and she saw all the other stuff on his eyes. Of course, about that time also there was a guy on campus who wore a dress every day on campus, every day. So I began, I guess about my last 4 years there, I would ask my senior most class to give me percentages based upon just what they saw. I said, what's the percentage of homosexuals at Morehouse? What's the percent of homosexuals in Scranton? What's the percent of homosexuals in the Atlanta University Center? In general, 96 or 97, the student body voted against having a homosexual fraternity on Morehouse campus. President Massey overrode them and established the homosexual fraternity anyway. But anyway, I would ask the students what the percentages were, and they would give estimates like 40% at Morehouse, 60% at Spelman, and 50% in the General University, Atlanta University Center, which Clark Atlanta, Morris Brown, ITC, International Theological Center, Seminary, whatever it was. And I discovered later that the Theological Center is massive. Anyway, I keep saying anyway, but that's all right. I didn't believe them. I didn't laugh them off, but I said, come on. And they said, no, come. And they took me outside. There's a space on Morehouse campus where there's this huge old bell. And they stood me out, Sale Hall. They stood me outside of the building. And when classes let out a few minutes later, they began to point out the students who were as they walked by. And I realized at the time, I don't know, because I wasn't raised with these guys. I don't know. They had, just like when I was young, there were things I could tell about students that the parents didn't know. Right. They knew, and they were pointing at him and he's, and those two were together, and but they were just pointing out who was who, and I'm standing there in shock because they were all over the place. Years later, I would say this is about 2000, because that was the last time I came to lecture on Morrison's campus. Even the first year where I was paid not to be a faculty, students would still bring me on campus to do lectures. The college put an end to that. They refused to allow the students a space for me to speak on campus. In fact, the last one was when the Qs tried to bring me on campus to talk about homosexuality.
So at the time you were vocally speaking against homosexuality.
Yeah, but it wasn't like a focus. It was just part of the discussion on manhood.
But this is why they didn't want you to speak.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And this was in 96.
This was in 96, 97, 98. I began to notice things about that time. I believe it was in 98 that I spoke at Crown Forum. Crown Forum is where they bring all of the students together and they'll have a speaker usually from outside. And I talked about manhood, and one of my statements was that effeminate males don't make good warriors, or won't make good warriors, and I explained why. And that afternoon in class, Channel 2 News had a reporter outside the classroom. The students noticed it, and then they escorted her back over to the administration because she was that was illegal. But I really was not aware of the magnitude of the politics. I'm just looking around saying this doesn't make sense. There's something really wrong with this, and I didn't understand how significant in numbers. And I'm not talking about like 100%.
Right.
I'm still assuming at that time maybe 10%, maybe 15%.
Right. But under 20%.
But under 20%. But it was just alarming to me that this existed at this school for men, and that nobody was saying anything about it. Of course, when you start to question that, then people begin to come and tell you the stories. People begin to come and tell you what's going on. People begin to point things out. That really, well, in terms of the writing, being at Morehouse led to the writing of Negroes and Other Essays, Excuses, and Homosexuality and the Feminization of African Males. It didn't, the Homosexuality and Feminization of African Males came out of, it started as a chapter in the sex imperative, but the sex imperative didn't start as a result of being at Morehouse. Homosexuality did. Just real quick, Negro started because what was it, 98 or 99, the brother who was elected as the president of the SGA asked me to do the speech at his induction ceremony. And my speech was on Negroes, and a freshman came to me afterward and said, I don't want to ask a dumb question, but what's a Negro? And I realized, he hasn't been in any of my classes. So that led to the writing of Negroes. Excuses came from, was asked to do a course in the summer for high schoolers that were coming to Morehouse, graduate seniors who were coming to Morehouse. And one day I was talking about interracial relationships, and this guy stood up, when he raised his hand, he said, there's scientific evidence that African men and Asian women have a better sexual fit. And this first time I laughed at a student. I laughed at him.
Yeah, it was
and then another guy on the other side of the classroom said, yeah, I've seen that evidence also. That led to writing Excuses. The homosexuality and feminization of African males came from the things that I began to see more and the things that NDI began to see. And also this, I call him gender confused, even though that may be, he's never admitted to it, but this is what I see. Daniel Blak, who I believe still teaches at Clark Atlanta, and his Rites of Passage program for males, as well as a number of statements that I heard him say, which he, along with other individuals who tried to claim that homosexuality had an African origin, that angered me. I said, that's not us. That angered me, and that led to the research for homosexuality and feminization of African males, because the initial intent of the book was to prove that it had no African origins. That was the initial intent of the book.
So at what point did you realize, because I'm trying to figure out, were you focusing, did you realize that was a serious issue, homosexuality, or was it still just an issue but not a focal point.
No, I didn't. I didn't realize that it was a major issue until the book was completed. Because I think for most folks, when you write a book, you're trying to make people understand something. And for me, this was something that was beginning to happen, and I wanted people to understand that this was an issue and that this wasn't us. And when the book came out, or really before the book came out, because when the book was on its way out, there were some people in the conscious community who became aware that the book was coming out. One in particular told me, "Don't publish it. Do not publish it, because this is not true. Homosexuality is part of us. It's always been part of us." This was Kwame Kalumara of the Malcolm X Grassroots movement. And I don't have a problem speaking about this because this angered me. Because to me, we saw him as an elder or an elder in training. We even brought him into Akabet to do a lecture on survival before that. And when the book came out, he stopped speaking and did a number of things to make it obvious that he was avoiding us. And that also threw me, because this is not how representatives in the conscious community were supposed to be elders and examples in the community. This is not how they act toward each other. So these things were really, I guess, like being naive. I had not encountered that in the quote-unquote conscious community. People speak to each other. I don't care if I don't like you or not. That really made me begin to understand the politics and the efforts being put in to push this into our community, to push this into the minds of our children. So, and really, if these things hadn't happened, then I probably would have just written it and kept on going. But and there wasn't backlash per se. The radio interviews, I was usually on the radio about twice a month. Those stopped. But it was those things that made me realize this is bigger than I thought it was. This is more significant than I thought it was. But by then, I was really out of the Morehouse environment, and I didn't see the major changes that were going on. I remember driving by one day, and the homosexual fraternity on campus, it looked like it had tripled in size. They were standing out on the steps in front of King Chapel, and it looked like they had tripled in size in terms of numbers. And then, of course, the reports, we were receiving a lot of reports from students about homosexual assaults on campus. And of course, I knew
the homosexual assaults, like sexual,
yes,
homosexual assaults,
yes, yeah,
on straight men.
It was also the incident on campus where the brother, the freshman, hit the guy over the head with the baseball bat, which I wrote an essay about that in Menticide, because the news and what Morehouse did, they immediately dismissed him, and what the news did to this young man, and it was really surprising also because his father was a minister, and usually that's something at Morehouse, but nobody talked about the fact that he was a freshman, the fact that the guy who he hit was a member of the Glee Club, which is saying something at Morehouse. It's the music major. And that this guy was much bigger than him. And he's standing in the shower with a bar of soap and maybe a washcloth. So in the essay, one of the things I tried to talk about was the fear that children have when a bully attacks a child in elementary school or middle school. Their fear really isn't that person is going to beat them up. That's probably their fear, is that person will kill them. It's at that level of fear. So I can imagine you're standing in the shower, and the excuse that the guy used was that he was trying to see if that was his friend, or he needed glasses from his friend or something. You don't need to open up the shower to ask him. So I can imagine you a freshman at college, you're intimidated by these seniors, these juniors, even the sophomores, and this guy's trying to hit on you. I probably would have responded in a similar fashion.
Yeah.
You know, the fear is enormous.
Indeed.
For that, but nobody talked about that. They just talked about, he assaulted this guy. They didn't give any of the details in the news. Nobody talked about it, and they didn't allow members of the conscious community to go and talk to him. Community. Mama Rumba tried to go and talk to him, and they wouldn't let him see him.
Wow, it's insane.
Yes, it is. That's the word for it.
Now, aside from Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, peace be upon her, you have provided some of the most important tools for us to understand this fight against homosexuality and what's going on in the actual push, and that there is an actual agenda. You, in fact, coined the term promosexual. Now, for those who don't understand what that is, I mean, at Street Black Pride, we have a full understanding, but for those who don't, can you explain what a promosexual is?
Yes, and that really came as a result of Kwame Kalomar. Because I assumed, and I still assume, that he's not homosexual. But the defense, it was vicious, incredibly intense defense of this, but that's not what you are. So the way that they're defending it, well, promosexual is or someone who defends homosexuality even more than those individuals who you know are homosexual. And promosexual may be homosexual, may not be. Usually it's not discernible. It may be concealed. So you still have a lot of homosexuals who are not admitting that they're homosexual because that confusion allows for them to continue to deliver that word without anybody being able to say, oh, well, you're saying that because you have a political interest in that. You have a vested interest in homosexuality. But if I don't say that I'm homosexual, but I'm defending homosexuality, then you can't attach that to me, and I can attach my statement to a more intellectual, objective, scholarly type interpretation. So promosexuals are those individuals who defend homosexuality more than homosexuals themselves. That the fine line between the homosexuals and promosexuals is declining because it's becoming more okay for you to just admit that you are a homosexual, even though there are still a significant number of people who are not admitting it. So we have to have categories, and the reason I did that was the same reason why in homosexuality and feminization African males I distinguish effeminacy from homosexuality, because they will use that to destroy your idea, destroy your theory, destroy your statement, because if they can find one effeminate male who's not homosexual, then that undermines your whole thing. So if you're saying that everybody who's defending homosexuality is homosexual, all you have to do is find one person who's not homosexual who's defending homosexuality. So you need a category for those individuals who are defending it, who either are claiming not to be or are not homosexual, so that your argument can't be dismissed because you're putting everybody into one category.
I know you're a strong supporter of the Street Black Pride movement.
Absolutely.
How important do you think a movement like Street Black Pride is in the 21st century?
Oh, the importance of it is immeasurable now. You use the word assault. That's exactly what this is. This is an assault on the African being. This is adding to the process of genocide. We're at war. So any movement that seriously confronts any aspect of that genocide, to me, is noteworthy and really beyond noteworthy. When you are trying to build the main thing that European culture, society is trying to destroy, which is the family institution. As I said before, Europeans came in when they came to the continent, and what they have continued to do in our communities to today. They didn't put all their energy into fighting against our economy or our political structure or our religious structure, if you will, even though they did some damage there. Their main focus was on destroying the family. Because if you destroy the family, then you destroy the continuity. You destroy the ability to pass on to children who they are. And that allows them to pass on to our children who they are, which of course is imitators of them. So when you have an organization that's talking about family first, that's talking about our tradition of child-centeredness and family-centeredness, that's extremely important, especially when everybody else is trying to say that that's irrelevant, or you can have all kinds of families or what have you. We are very very, very strong supporters of the straight black pride, and take pride in being supporters of the straight black pride movement, because it is doing something that needs to be done. I've talked to so many, and there's a survey that was done in Atlanta where children don't even conceive of marriage as, they don't even conceive of it. You know, not talking conceive of it as something viable, they don't even conceive of it because they don't see it. So when you're talking, and there's of course reasons why. So to have a movement that's pushing for African men and women coming together, forming strong, viable warrior communities, you can't beat that. You absolutely can't beat that. And also, when we're looking at straight black pride, we're talking about building up the character, building up the inner strength of our men and women. Why do I say that? Because whatever Europeans have worked hard, either directly or through Negroes, to destroy our community, there's a reason why. And marriage has been one of those things that they've worked very hard to destroy. We're like a 63% divorce rate within our community. You don't want anything in the community that's going to build strong character, that's going to strengthen individuals. And you gain strength and your character becomes better and stronger through struggle. So whenever, it's just like go to the gym, your muscles get bigger because you have to work at doing this. You run faster because when you're dog tired, you just keep on going. You think better because when you're tired and your brain is tired, but you keep on studying. Marriage is by far the thing, the institution, the situation, the environment that presents you with more trials over your lifetime than anything else. So it is the greatest strengthening institution, as far as I'm concerned, that we have. And it does it without you having to sit down and read it and study about it. You're working with this individual, and if you love, care for this individual, then there are going to be things that you're going to have to give up. There are things you're going to have to sacrifice on a regular basis for this individual. And every sacrifice increases your strength and improves your character. So again, straight black pride is a very significant factor in our community. I expect it to really grow because I think that there are many of us who know that something's wrong with all this insanity, but there really hasn't been anything to latch on to. There hasn't been an organization to become a part of or to support, or, you know. So this represents.
We definitely are growing.
Yes,
absolutely. Definitely growing. In closing, I know that you have the Colgan School, and I know you're doing African-centered education. What do you think, and in brief, what are some of the solutions that we can do, that we can use to counter this homosexual assault on our people?
A number of things. First, as simple or disconnected as it may sound, stop spoiling these children. Because spoiled children don't listen. And it's not their fault. They didn't raise themselves. So this is not like pointing at the children. No, this is the people who are raising them. When you spoil a child, then the child thinks that they know everything already. And that's what Europeans need, because that takes them out from under the guidance and control of parents who may know. And then they become raised by the socialization in this insanity. They begin to be raised by their peers in the idiot box, and that's teaching them that all that insanity makes sense. So that's the first thing that we have to start doing, because even you have good-hearted parents who understand or clear on this homosexual issue and all the other issues that we have. If you do that, then the child is not listening to you. They may hear, but they're not listening to you. We have to return order to our homes. Men and women in our community who decide that they want to become complements and produce children, they have to understand that they need to put themselves second in this relationship, and that the family structure, the community, the children is more important than their own personal pains and arguments and stuff like that. Which you're going to get over that and go forward and build that family so that the children can also understand the importance of struggle. We also need to do a lot more homeschooling institution building. In fact, Enia and I are going to be doing in April a workshop on building African-centered educational institutions, homeschooling institutions. We need, as long as you're in their space, as long as you're under their tutelage, then you're going to be taught what they want you to teach, what they want you to know. And all we got to do is look around. The books are being introduced into the schools. The sex education classes are being introduced at kindergarten level. So they of course know you go to their children. You change the children, you change the people. So we need to take them out of that. I'm not trying to change it. This is a dinosaur. This is the multi-billion-dollar business. Diseducating our children. So if you can't change it, then you create something else. You don't keep trying to work to change something from the inside that's not going to change and is doing exactly what it's supposed to be doing. The educational system in this country is doing exactly what it's supposed to be doing. So if we see that as a problem, and I do, then we need to bring our children out of it. People need to stop making excuses about what they can't do because of their job or what have you. Got a community, work with that community, find a way. No, we need to make the sacrifices for the children, which is the reason why we're here in the first place. So the spoilage, complementarity, building relationships, and building educational institutions, to me, that's the foundation. Everything else will flow out of that. And of course, all those things need to be grounded in an understanding that we are African and understanding that we are at war. Because if neither one of those is in place, then you're really not doing anything. You're just making yourself suffer when your child is really just going to go that way anyway. If you don't give them an understanding of their power and the relationship of that power to the empowerment of African people, then as soon as they're finished getting better educated by you, then they're going to be able to better serve Europeans.
That was powerful. Thank you for your time. It was a pleasure, but more than that, it was an honor, a privilege.
Appreciate you, Warren. It's wonderful. Glad to be here.
We were here with Mwalimu, Baruti, the premier scholar of the 21st century. I'm your brother, Blak. Peace and Black Power, family.
Baby for Hodia.